Let's get reaction now to what the president's address or what the president said during his address. We're joined by COSATU spokesperson Sizwe Pamla. He is joining us via Zoom. Mr. Pamla, thank you very much for your time. Nothing new spotted in what the president has spoken about. What's your initial reaction to what he said? Everything he said is everything we know.
Well, indeed, yes. Speeches, they always sound the same anyway. The reality is that on the ground, facts tell a totally different story. When we are talking about celebrating freedom, in South Africa, we have a long, long way to go. Even in areas where we have made progress, we are starting to witness some reversals. South Africans are still not free from economic exploitation. You can look at what the speeches of the last 29 years have said. The reality is that on the ground, people are feeling the effects of administrative failures. Even in the political space, where we were saying, well, look, politically, at least we can say we have political freedom. In the last, 4 years, we have seen a spike in political killings, where people are not free to really join their political parties without facing threats to their lives. So there are many areas where South Africans are really feeling let down by government. So the only way to really honor this day is for us to start honoring this day through action. Speeches aren't really going to make a difference, but action is really going to speak much louder than all of the commemorative speeches.
And I have to agree with what you just said there, Mr. Pamla, in the latter parts of your answer. And something else that you said is that even where we've made progress, we have begun to witness regression in some of those things. ESCOM, for instance, being one of them. You're a partner and an allegiance to the governing party. What are you doing in the meetings that you hold, NEC meetings, etc., to hold them to account? Because clearly they don't want to account to South Africans.
Well, on a daily basis, we are tirelessly working to remind them what the struggle was about. We meet in many various platforms to actually remind them of what the struggle was about and also what the struggle was not about. For example, we go to NETLEC to debate and argue over policy, the policy direction. The challenges that this country faces were actually designed in 1948. They were not an accident. Levers of the state were used to design an unequal society. So to undo that, we still believe that the levers of the state needs to be used to intervene to make sure that we do away with the economic system that was designed and make sure that those who were oppressed, deliberately so, are given the necessary support so that they can also benefit from South Africa's economy. The reality is, after 1994, there was a temptation from those in power to say, you know what, just because of political freedom, then the free market will actually do the work. Now, almost 30 years later, we know that the free market is not going to help or resolve the problems that were designed. So we continue to argue for a developmental state. We sit there, we debate policies, we push back against policies that we feel are not going to help those at the bottom end of the economic pyramid. But also on the legislative front, in Parliament, we are very active in ensuring that we pass laws that look after the people. We do away with laws that oppress the people. But also generally as an organization, we continue to constantly mobilize, not just in areas that I've mentioned, but at a societal level. We have talked about the cost of living, we've talked about many interventions that we feel are necessary. So as a partner, of course, we do take some responsibility because the failures of our partners are also our failures. But as an organization that represent workers, we continue to make sure that we remind our own partners of what this struggle was about and what it was not about.
Further than reminding, I mean, would it be fair for South Africans to then say the tripartite alliances such as COSATU don't have the power to influence things to go in the right trajectory? Because you go into debates, but we don't see any changes. Even the workers that you represent, even through your affiliates, Nahau, are struggling. They, can't make the end of the month.
No, what we can say is that we are not making necessary progress at an acceptable pace. But to say there's no progress at all, it will be an exaggeration on our part.
But it was you who said we're witnessing the progress regurgitating.
No, that's what I'm saying, yes. To say exactly the point, that we were making progress. That's the point I wanted to make, to say some of the reversals that we're starting to witness are reversals of the progress that we were making. So we also do have to acknowledge that, let's say, over the last decade or so, the problems have become intense. And that even in areas where we thought we were actually going forward, we're starting to stall, and we're starting to see the erosion of some of those benefits and hard-won rights. So it is really a big problem, because, for an example, if you look at the amount of money that has been spent on social expenditure, it is really a totally different picture to before 1994. We have to acknowledge that. Now, we do have a social safety net. It's inadequate. It's not enough. It is not enough because the demand is too high. I mean, we have got something like 24 million people who are on social welfare. We have 70 million, 70% of young people who are seated at home watching their dreams pass them by. So while you look at the amount of money that government is spending, it is not enough because the demand is high. Demand is high because we have not transformed the economy. So these are the challenges that we have to grapple with, which means the only way to actually make sure that we don't spend the amount of money that we spend on social safety net is for us to create an economy that is growing, that is able to absorb young people, absorb people who are of a working age, so that they can look after themselves and their families. So we're failing on growing the economy. As a result, we end up spending a lot of money on social welfare. Because the demand is too high, we're not able to adjust that money into acceptable levels where we reach the food poverty line and such. So government is trying, but the government is also making some wrong choices and persisting on those choices. That is where we all feel betrayed, because for 30 years we've experimented with policies that have let us down, and to still hear people saying that actually these policies will help solve our problems going forward is really very, very disappointing.
It's actually a spit in the face. So just very quickly, do you think today we're actually celebrating freedom, or we're just celebrating the fact that we can go to the polls?
No, we are celebrating freedom, and we should really take this celebration seriously, because we've come a long way. We've come a long way. We're not just victims of an apartheid system, but we're victims of colonialism.
Yeah. Okay.
There are many people who actually died and paid the ultimate price for me and you to sit here and have this conversation without actually feeling censored in any way. Yeah. So there is a lot that we have achieved. We have a lot to celebrate. But at the same time, let's have these kinds of conversation where we are not naive in terms of what we're celebrating. We also understand that we haven't done a lot when it comes to economic transformation, in terms of ensuring that people can feel comfortable at home because they have roof over their head, they have clothes on their back, and they have food on the table. So we need to continue to aspire to do much more, but we also need to appreciate what this country was, and the people who actually paid the price for us to be where we are today, to be able to have these conversations that we're having.
Well, Mr. Pamla, it's both mine and your job, I guess, even, with just ordinary crime. South Africans, committing crime against each other. That's also something that goes against freedom and why people died before 1994. But thank you very much for speaking to us. Sizwe Pamla, the spokesperson of COSATU.